So the situation in Iran is deteriorating day by day, as we know, and the regime is struggling to hold on to power. Now, the reality is they are intensifying repression, particularly to the PMOI and the MEK, as well as women and students. They're trying to suppress the opposition. They will fail. And the reality is that there's very brave people literally putting their necks on the line every single day, in particular the women of Iran. I have to say, we all salute you in your struggle. Now, as part of the scheme, the disinformation that we see laying the ground for terrorist acts, as we saw in recent weeks in Berlin, against the office of the NCRI, and then the attempted assassination, well, actually murder or attempted murder of Alejo Vidal Quadras because he supports the NCRI and MEK. Now, Madam Rajavi and her movement has played a decisive role, not only in advancing the uprising, but also offering a viable, organised, democratic alternative that delivers on the true aspirations of the Iranian people. Now, the NCRI and Madam Rajavi have spearheaded the global justice-seeking campaign to hold the regime and its leaders to account and secure justice for the victims of the Iranian regime and the people of Iran.
One of the great issues that I came across was that of the NCRI, PMOI, and I've been involved in it to a greater or lesser extent for a considerable number of years now. I absolutely salute what you, Madam Rajavi, have done, and I salute especially too those refugees from Iran whom I have visited on 2 occasions in Albania, where they have been given refuge, which those many senior professional Iranian people of great talent have settled down, and where they are trying to play their part in securing a happier future for Iran. It is an absolute outrage that on the 29th of July, the Tehran Criminal Court issued a public announcement publishing 104 names of individuals affiliated with the PMOI, most of whom had left Iran about 40 years before, calling them on them to appoint a lawyer as they had been charged. And we know what the result of that will be. They will be charged in their absence, they will be prosecuted in their absence, they will be given no opportunity to make their defense, no lawyer will be permitted to represent the justice of their views, and they will be sentenced to death. And a death sentence in the current atmosphere that Iran is purveying could be carried out because the Iranian government is prepared to murder people wherever they are.
And I agree that we have to act. I agree that we need to outlaw the IRGC. We also need to act against Iranian banks in the United Kingdom. We also need to act against Iranian airlines in the United Kingdom. But there's one other thing that I just wanted to add, that we need to also raise public awareness about the abuses by the Iranian regime, and we need to provide moral support to those who have the courage themselves to take on that regime inside their own country.
Sadly, due to international failure at the UN, which Dr. Mosk referred to, and the West's softly approach, which is to accommodate the regime, thereby hoping to encourage a change in its appalling behavior, we have a situation now in Iran where human rights defenders and pro-democracy activists are imprisoned, while human rights abusers, like the current president, Raisi, are promoted instead of being held accountable for the atrocities for which they're responsible. I also believe, as Madam Rajavi said in her remarks, that our governments could take important steps here in the UK to hold the regime to account by looking into prosecution of its officials and leaders under international law and the legal principle of universal jurisdiction. I believe the appropriate step is to continue to impose targeted human rights sanctions against the regime. Our government must include the regime's leaders, particularly the Supreme Leader Khomeini and his President Raisi, in the next round of sanctions, to make it clear to the regime that they cannot and will not escape justice and accountability.
As Lord Carlisle has said, it even comes down to execution where it suits the regime. Ever since the theocracy usurped power in 1979 by stealing the popular democratic revolution, the judiciary has been used as a tool of oppression, and the paramilitary IRGC has been a used tool of terror, eliminating pro-democracy forces and dissenting voices, both at home and abroad. The reality, of course, is that the regime has closed all venues of opposition through parliamentary and political activity. What it does at home, it tries to do abroad as well. The people of Iran are forced to live under religious tyranny and oppression. The regime's laws restrict Iranian people's fundamental rights and freedoms, and they're left with no other recourse but to rebel through popular uprising to realize their democratic aspirations, to enjoy their fundamental rights and their freedoms. And in this regard, as Lady Olone has said, we must applaud the brave women of Iran and the resistance units of the democratic opposition referred to by Madam Rajavi earlier on, for challenging the regime's repressive laws and defying its oppression to expand the uprising and anti-regime activities and protests. I would simply end by referring to the 10-point plan. If it was all about saying no, if it was all about the denunciation of the regime, that would be not good enough. But the NCRI has been to the fore in spelling out what it would do if it had the opportunity to govern freely and fairly in Iran. And I urge our government to set an example globally by cutting diplomatic relations with a regime until that continues to carry out the kind of obscenities that we have seen over this last year until it ends executions, releases all political prisoners, releases detained protesters and dual citizens, and verifiably scraps the discriminatory and repressive laws against women and the Iranian people.
No, as others have said, it's the Iranian people who will decide their future, as it should be. And as Madam Rajavi has so kindly said, explained in her remarks earlier, they are determined to end the current regime to establish a democratic republic where freedom, liberty, and the right to make your own decisions are there. I wish them well. Wish them all well and success in this endeavour. Because if the world needs anything now, it is an Iran that is working for peace, an Iran that's working for freedom, an Iran that's working for human rights and stability, and working with the NCRI and Madam Rajavi and knowing of their 10-point plan for the future of Iran. I see no reason at all why the Iranian people should fear or indeed fail in fulfilling their dreams of a free, democratic, and prosperous republic. Roll on that day.
The biggest war that they're engaged in is the war at home. They've executed, I understand, about another 170 people since October the 7th, executed them for having the temerity to say they don't agree with what's happening in their own country. This is a regime where execution and torture have become the norm. A regime with a taste for blood and a visceral hatred of the concept of freedom and democracy. And it's a regime that fears Madam Rajavi and her plans for a democratic, free Iran. They're currently ratcheting up their attack on the opposition, which possibly explains why they're trying to intimidate supporters of the opposition here and in other countries, why they've announced that they're going after members of the PMOI and the MEK, many of whom left Iran perhaps as long ago as 40 years ago.
I've lost track of the number of times I and others have called for the complete proscription of the IRGC in this country. I hope it is coming soon, but we will keep calling for it until it does. And we need to see the UK and indeed other parts of the international community taking a much stronger action against the criminal regime in Iran and prosecuting those that we can identify. So I wish you every success and be assured that I will continue to speak out and speak in support of yourselves until that day comes. We have to be on the right side of history, and I'm convinced that you are.
Insofar as Iran is concerned, the UK can also exercise universal jurisdiction under the Criminal Justice Act of 1988 with respect to the crime of torture. And this is a case for acts of torture committed in or after 1988. And the jurisdictional reach of that act is much broader, since it doesn't require individuals to be residents or national in the UK. It's enough for them to be merely present on UK territory. So the UK can work and can exercise universal jurisdiction to bring accountability and to bring justice for victims. If the United Kingdom and the UK government are truly committed to holding the Iranian regime accountable, it should fully exploit the potential of universal jurisdiction.
I have to say, I am very pleased to see that David Cameron, Lord Cameron, has been made our new Foreign Secretary. So I say to him and to our government, we must not be afraid to call out the Iranian regime, and especially to prescribe the IRGC. The government should officially support Maryam Rajavi's recommendations to end the impunity of Iran and publicly demand the arrest and prosecution of the regime's leaders at an international tribunal. As soon as the regime's mercenaries and terrorist proxies see our resolve, they will fold and retreat. We know that the regime in Iran is rejected by the people. The Iranian people want justice, human rights, and democracy. They're not going to fight to keep the present regime. They are already fighting to overthrow it. We're seeing this right across Iran today, how brave women, men, and youth are defying this brutal and merciless regime. And in their fight, they get inspiration and hope from your leadership, Maryam, and the resistance movement you lead. The people of Iran know that you and the NCRI will not compromise on the Iranian people's legitimate demand for a democratic republic and for the pursuit of justice against the regime's leader.
And one of the greatest impediments to that aspiration is the regime that currently rules in Iran, a regime that is dedicated to the lack of human rights of all the peoples of Iran, a regime that is dedicated to killing, to murder, to execution, to torture. There are 3 points that I'd briefly like to address today. One, the issue that has been mentioned previously of President Raisi. 2, the question of the 104 persons, Iranians, who are currently on trial in their absence in Iran. And 3, the issue of the women of Iran who stand as a tribute to the strength and purpose of women, as an example to all of us around the globe.